Welcome to the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and I'm so excited for today's episode where I am joined by the Tracy Piper, a contemporary painter, muralist, author, and art activist known for her vibrant portraits and bold, abstract realist style, which I can say now knowing Tracy on such a deeper level matches who she is to a T. Now, Tracy's work goes beyond the canvas. She is using her art and every interaction to really think about and challenge social constructs and celebrate diversity, with her murals and her books really inspiring inclusive, positive conversations. Together, we're going to explore the intersection of shame and creativity today, diving into Tracy's journey from feeling unseen to embracing her identity not only as an artist, but as a community builder. We discuss the role of art as a form of therapy, the courage it takes to be vulnerable, not just on the canvas, but in our lives as a whole, and the vital importance of finding support in a world that can often feel isolating. This conversation is a celebration of imperfection, self-love, and the messy, beautiful process of creating, both in art and in life. So whether you're an artist, an advocate, or someone seeking more authenticity in your life, this episode is going to inspire you to embrace your own worth and build deeper connections, not only with yourself, but with the world around you. So take a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Gosh, Tracy, we're finally doing it.
Yay!
I know. I loved your joke about the other day when you were like, we can finally be friends after this, because I have refused to have any more conversations with you until we recorded this. So I think equal parts excited for this interview and what's going to come out of it, and for the friendship that can happen once we're done with this interview.
I've been like dying because we really connected the other day, just like, oh my gosh, like what you're doing and what I'm doing is very wrapped up in like mental health and all these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just want to talk to you about all of this. And,
I
know, like we've already become friends through our lifting that we're doing,
Yes.
But like, that deeper level. And then you're like, but wait, let's make a podcast. And I was like, okay.
I love that. I love that. And that's hard too when you see somebody where you're like you, I think, and you and I do it through such different platforms, but in such a similar way. Like our goal is to make other people feel seen and safe. Like it's so obvious when I interact with you, like you just want people to feel good. You just want them to feel like they are okay in who they are. And it emanates, like it comes into everything that you do. And so I think there's also this draw when you find someone that is how they function in the world. You just want to absorb everything. And I think since we both really try to lead with that, it feels like this excitement that we're building off of each other of like, oh my gosh, there's another person like me. And also that I could trust isn't going to just take it from me and like takes and takes and takes without receiving and giving back, because sometimes that happens and we're still going to be the ones that give, but that's also really challenging. So it's nice when you see someone where I'm like, oh no, I also know that like if I need something, like you've got me. And if I need to just have a day, you're going to hold me up if I need it. And that is something so beautiful about you. So if you haven't been told that recently, that's a big reason why I got so drawn to wanting to have you on the podcast, was that exact experience.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people say like are surprised because I'm on Instagram a lot, and like people are always like, "Wow, you are just like your Instagram," and I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, how would I be different? Like, I'm just a funny weirdo who loves people and like loves life, and like it's who I am. Like, But yeah, it's funny that you say that because it's, it is. I get that comment a lot. People are like, whoa, you are like a little rainbow sunshine lady.
Well, and I feel like people's interpretation must be so obviously we know the Instagram piece is because Instagram or any social media is so curated. There's such an experience we're trying to have of ourselves, with ourselves, the projection to the world of who we are. And so it's not common to meet someone who is authentically portraying themselves in and outside of social media. But I think on the flip side, when you meet someone that shows up like that in real life, you're like, it's probably fake. It's probably not like who she really is. So then when they get to know you and they see like, oh, that's a genuine experience of someone, I think they're surprised on both sides of it because it is
Mm.
the continuity in your authentic self, but also this very genuine care that often we're in such a hustle culture that I think we forget how to do it. I don't think it's that more people aren't
Mm.
capable of it. I just think they've forgotten how to put that into practice. And that's something that you very much lead with in how you show up in the world.
Well, thanks. Should we
Yeah.
give a little background on me for
Yes,
your viewers?
please.
Because we just launched in. So I am the Tracy Piper. I am a new contemporary artist, born and raised in Oakland, California. I make work about people. That's what I love, with a socially conscious kind of edge or messaging.
And I'm curious because, okay, so as we connect it back to authenticity and thinking about art, one, I'm curious if art was always the thing you thought you were going to do. Like if you thought, when you were 10, when you were 5, like, yes, I am going to be this person doing these things, painting giant ass murals, hosting shows. And two, how do you see art as an extension of that authentic self? Because everything I experience on the outside feels like I'm witnessing the same breath of you in that. I just get to celebrate other people through your work as well.
Hmm. So that's a twofold question. You're going to have to remind me about the second one. We'll start with the first. So first off, no, I did not think I was going to be a painter at all. I actually started gymnastics when I was 4 and circus when I was 9,
Wow.
and became a circus performer. And that was my career. Like I performed all over the country, got to go to Mexico, got to go to Canada. I learned how to juggle, stilt walk, sit on my head, like all of those things.
By choice, or were you put into it?
By choice.
Oh,
Nobody in my family did
wow.
it. But as a child, I really struggled with feeling like I fit in at school. Of course, later on had an
Mm.
ADHD like diagnosis in my 30s after I became a mom. But
Mhm.
obviously I was having issues in school, and exercise to me just like made so much sense. And so for me, like gymnastics, circus, it was like, I want to do this every day. I get it. I'm good
Yeah.
at it. I love it. And I'm like confident in this one thing I can do.
Yeah.
And so I was obsessed with it, and that really truly became my career. I literally ran away at 16 to join the circus. I'd always drawn. I love to draw. It's a great experience. I'm sure that's also ADHD. Like in
Yeah.
school, for me to listen, I had to be doing something with my hands, and so I was always drawing.
Mhm.
I eventually hurt my back in my 20s and was like, oh, I can't do this forever.
In the circus? Like you heard it there.
Oh no, it was a car accident. But realized
Oh.
like, okay, you know what? This is not a long-standing career. I can't do this forever. But the cool thing about like kind of growing up in the circus and in California is you meet a lot of people and you meet everyone, right? And like a lot of circus, everyone's like, it's the underbelly. But what is an underbelly? We're all just
Right.
people trying to survive, like
Right.
trying to live our truths. And I think, like when you travel a lot at a young age and when you are working in that atmosphere at a young age, you meet a lot of people, a lot of different types of people. And I think that's where like my true love of people really blossomed, or I grew into it, or I was a part of it. Like, I just like
Mhm.
people are amazing, especially when they
Mhm.
can do all the amazing things in the circus, but also when you can't. So then I hurt my back, and then I went to college. I thought I was going to make comic books. I was a big comic book reader.
Mm.
But I fell in love with painting. So when I graduated, I was an illustration major, but I knew when I graduated I wanted to paint, but tell stories. And now, here I am 12 years later.
Telling
Telling
stories.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it makes sense with the circus, right? Like, even when you make an act, you're telling a story, right? You're acting something. And I think I just do it now with paint as opposed to with my body.
One thing you said that I thought was really interesting. So you experienced a sense of otherness growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you
Yes.
didn't have this ADHD diagnosis when you were younger, but part of that
No.
is also your brain is moving so fast and you're trying to figure out how to function in a world that's already making you feel like you don't quite fit into it. So
Yes.
when you get into the circus, I'm assuming that focus, that sense of this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my body. Like you said, there's a centering that kind of comes in that. So it kind of allowed your brain to maybe slow down a little or at least be anchored in something and with a group of people where the otherness wasn't as much of an issue. it sounds
Yeah.
like you found community, which
Yeah.
allowed you to sort of feel more secure in yourself. Did you
Yeah.
have that? You mentioned like no one in your family was in the circus. You alluded to, and I know we'll get to it in a little bit, that you ended up running away to join the circus. And so were
Yeah.
you also not feeling like you were rooted or a part of or enough in your family unit as well? Or was it only at school?
I definitely struggled as a child, feeling worthy, feeling loved, feeling the feelings that we need to grow properly.
Yeah.
And, it's really the hardest thing about it too, I think, is when you're a kid, like you don't know anything different. You're like, oh, these hours I spend alone is normal. These
Mm,
never seeing my parents because they're working all the time is normal, right? Like you never think about those things
right.
from a perspective of like wisdom because you don't have any yet. You're a
Yeah.
child.
You only know your experience of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think, beyond just the physical aspect, Circus was community. Circus was a bunch of misfits who maybe didn't get good grades like I didn't. I was a fighter at school. If, I was the first one to throw fists.
Mhm. Your
I know I
defense
look
was ready.
sweet, but,
Yeah. I know, but yeah, yeah.
it's tough, I was a real rough and tumble kid. I was also growing up in Oakland, California, which, is amazing, but also has its struggles. And I was a fighter and I didn't have support, people weren't around. And so I think for me, like, especially, as we kind of take this thread towards what I'm doing now, you put the pieces together
Yeah.
of like, oh yeah, why do you want to make everyone feel seen and heard, Tracy? Oh, it's
Yeah.
because that you were lacking that.
Yeah.
And I will say this year has been like, I don't know what it is about 2024, but like it has been such a reflection of like, oh, that's why you were that way. Like,
Mhm.
gosh, man, it was tough growing up, and everyone has their own struggles. I think mine was really finding a place that I felt loved,
Mm.
appreciated, and Circus was the place that I found that and that
Yeah.
community. And it was the place that I felt the most seen, I guess, which is so funny
Mhm.
because like you're a clown or you're dressed up like some tree or something, like,
Right.
it's me, a
Yeah.
tree. I don't know.
But also you're like, you spent your life not having people see you for anything other than you aren't getting the good grades. You're the fighter. Like the labels you were getting were putting you in boxes that weren't who you were. They were
Mm,
how you were defending against your shame and loneliness. And so,
yeah.
or your brain just trying to fucking function in a world that's designed for only certain people to excel. And being like, well, if you're not getting A's, this is the problem. Like, of course, you're going to then, when you find a community that's like, no, there's a place for everyone, as weird or crazy or whatever stories people have about the circus, there's one thing that I think is consistent in any portrayal. It is a community. Like
It
whether it's
is.
been through like American Horror Stories version of the circus, which definitely freaked me out, or like the really wonderful versions, like it is a community of people that are celebrating that everyone's differences are what elevates the collective and the individual. And so you had that.
Yeah, I mean, your differences are not only common, you actually make an act out of it,
Right.
That's what you like. You're like, hey, this is actually my strength, right?
Right.
And definitely with a brain that had a hard time focusing. And I think there's a trait too. Somebody was saying like the trait of ADHD is like procrastination is like your best moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's performing.
Yeah.
Everything's on the line. That
Right at that last
thrill.
piece. Yes.
And I loved it. I loved being on stage. I loved like who knows what's going to happen, but I know that I've got this skill set and I know I'm fun to watch. Something will come out of it.
Yeah.
And so I think I like really craved that as a kid and felt strength in that.
So then what led to basically you said running away at 16? Was it just this like continuation of this is where I want to be? My parents aren't around. I'm out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, a combination of things. When I was in high school, we used to have like a moment of silence for kids who had died almost once a month from gang
Wow.
violence, from all sorts of things. My high school was rough. I saw
Mm,
people, pull weave out of other people's hair. I had seen guns in the hallways. I mean, this was really tough times.
Yeah.
And I think what that really like instilled in me, honestly, was that life is fucking short. And if you don't like what you're doing and you don't like where you are, why are you there? You know, like, and that was what really hit home for me, was like, I wasn't happy at home. I had an abusive boyfriend at the time. The only thing that gave me joy was Circus, right? Like, that was the place I felt great. I felt safe. I was already, I started making money at 13. I already had my own bank account. I was already taking care of myself, cooking for myself, going back and forth, getting myself everywhere. You know, like, I was already essentially doing it.
A functioning adult at 16. Yeah, or at 13, honestly.
Yeah. So by the time I was 16, it was like, okay, bye.
Yeah. And did they fight you? Like, did your parents push back?
No. I mean, I think that was the reality. It's like, you know, I also didn't give them a choice in some regard. You know, I struggled with depression really badly. I mean, coming out of a situation where you don't feel seen or heard, you wonder if you're even worthy of being here. You know, it was really hard. And so I think the real breaking point for me was trying to commit suicide, failing, thank God I'm here, breaking up with the abusive boyfriend, realizing that even with all these like tumultuous things, nobody was going to rescue me. Nobody was coming for me. And deciding, fuck it. I'm done. You know, I'm done feeling like shit. I'm done feeling like nobody wants me around. I'm just done with it. And that's what I literally just walked out the door. I mean, I found an apartment and I was like, I'm done. Bye. And I think, you know, like, people are like, wow, you were so strong for that, you know, and it's like, was I? Or was I just like, was being in the place that I was so uncomfortable that like leaving felt like not scary at all? You know, like, leaving was safer than staying for me.
Yeah. But I think, so two things you said. I mean, one, you did give them a choice in the sense that they were still your parents. Having a very complicated relationship with my mom and the wisdom of the new Beverly Hills Cop movie, which obviously was like all about, you know, growth and mental health reflection, you know, not an action movie or a funny movie just to like make more money. But there's a line in there that, oh gosh, it's like still stings in my heart. So basically the cop, like the main guy Eddie Murphy plays, has a daughter. I don't remember this from all the like 80s movies of it, but he had a daughter and a wife, and he like moved them out to LA, and then he went back to, I think it's Detroit or wherever he's like in the Midwest. He has like no real relationship with her. It's very estranged. The whole movie is about him going out to help her on a case where she's in trouble.
Yeah.
And trying to kind of push into this relationship, but he hasn't owned any of his shit before. And there's this line in the car where she's like, but you were still the parent. The parent is always the parent. I was always the kid.
Yeah.
And there's this reality that, yes, I understand you walked out the door, but they had a choice and they didn't show up. And that's theirs to own and to hold. And you have done so much healing around that. But the thing, as I'm like clawing into this wound that you're like, fuck, I gotta call my therapist after this. But there's more to it. And like you said, you're coming to terms with a lot of this year, but to not feel wanted by the two people, and obviously everyone's circumstances are different. Maybe it's one, maybe it's multiple people, but like the people that are your primary caregivers, that's the one place we're always supposed to feel chosen. And you didn't. And that was not fair. And then you're in relationships with people that your job was to be in service to whatever storyline they had, an abusive relationship, you know, even like being the fighter at school. There's a role you played that serviced other people and all these defenses that came up, and you're just waiting to be chosen. And I think, how could you not like
you're gonna make me cry?
That's the point. How could you not get to a place where you're like, suicide feels like the only option because I can't spend the rest of my life in a world where no one's going to pick me. I don't need everybody to pick me. I don't need to be the center. I just need to feel like someone shows up. And then something beautiful happened in that, which you're right. I think probably for many people that survive a suicide attempt, there is a sort of a blessing and a curse, depending on the support and the help and the healing and the internal sense of self that they have to come through it. Because for many people, they don't have the external or internal support to take a different path. They just keep going till that one ends.
Yeah.
But in your case, you went, I have to choose me. And that is brave, because that is not a thing people do. People don't go, I can choose me. They stay in what I call the predictable shittiness.
Yeah.
Just continuing. And then they get into the victim story of the world is happening to me. And for many people, they are stuck and they don't have power. And there's a lot of privilege for different people to get out of that. I recognize that. And in this situation, I think it's really important that you do celebrate that that's not the norm. There is something incredibly resilient about coming out of getting to the place where you don't want to live anymore and then saying, I'm choosing myself. And I'm going to trust that choosing myself is enough to take the next step and to live one more day or 2 more days or whatever that is. And then obviously the beauty is that we get to be all celebrating and being with you now and choosing you now.
I agree with you. It is not an easy switch, right? That's not a switch that just like clicks.
Right.
There was definitely, before attempts, there was depression, there was cutting, there was all those other things that come with it. Like, and probably also just risky behavior. Like, fuck it, why not?
Yeah.
But I do think, like I said earlier, is like when you're also in a community like the school that I was in, and they tried, like, don't get me wrong, everything has layers upon layers. But as a kid, like, being that close to violence constantly and that close to death. I mean, like my friend got shot in the leg for having 35 cents. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
In broad daylight.
Yeah.
Like it's when you're that close to it. I mean, I think that was the big switch for me is like, okay, well, I could die. And I may feel that way at this moment, but like, I mean, thank God I had friends in the circus. I mean, I literally, that's why I ran away to them. It was like, this is where I feel whole. This is where I feel good.
Yeah.
This is where I'm going to go.
This is the respite place from all the pain.
But I do think, too, it's like, I think if you struggle for a really long time, you can continue on that path. I struggled for a really long time. And I just one day decided, like, this is it. This is enough. I'm tired of this. Yeah.
And so let's fast forward with that. So you go through this, you're carrying these stories, you are having to make this decision. Like you said, it wasn't just one day you felt like shit. The next day you decided, I love myself. And then everything was peachy. Like, it's still a process.
Ooh, the process of loving myself. Yeah. I mean, I guess this is the other thing I'll say. And this is why this year has been a real struggle for me is part of what I did was I continued to be a goldfish. I forgot why I wanted to kill myself. I forgot why I ran away. I just looked at the next goal, the next thing. I was like, okay, you know what? Let's move out. Find an apartment. Okay, you found an apartment. Go to work. Do the thing. Do the next show. Do the next thing. Do the next thing. Da-da-da-da. Keep working. Keep working. Go to college. Da-da-da-da. Have a family. Da-da-da-da-da. And this year was when I went, wait a minute.
There's no room left to bury this stuff anymore.
Well, I think, as your parents age too, you're also forced with, okay, well, how do I show up for these people now that they are in their times of crises when they never showed up for you? Where do you go from there, right? And I just lived in this little like bubble of Delulu. Everything's fine. I'm gonna do
Which
my
was
thing.
protective, just to be clear. That was your brain trying to protect you from trauma. That's what happens to people all the time.
And you can intellectually understand that.
Yes.
And yet also not face those things. And this year, I think for me, was like truly facing it. Look, I'm a mom now. My kid's 8. My career is really happening. I'm finding joy again. Like I've been through dark phases after that. I think this year though, and I am grateful for the roughness of it, I'll say, because the reflection finally is important. Yeah. And you're like, and especially having a kid who's 8, like you're like, at 16, I left. Yeah. My kid is 8. I got 8 more years.
In the circus at the time, like how old they are, about to start making real money, like within the next few years, and feeling completely abandoned. And so it's interesting. Oftentimes what happens when you have kids or you're like very close to kids, when they reach ages of major points of reflection or when we have deep wounds, they just like are fantastic at triggering that for us in different ways. And they aren't conscious of it. And it's really tricky because we can become reactive in our daily life now, even though there's no threat in the moment here. But our defenses are back up because we're still going back to ourselves at 8. Or maybe now you are fast forwarding and you're going, oh my gosh, I'm already thinking about 16 or I'm thinking about this. Or like you said, with your parents aging, you're still going back to these inner wounds of them not being there and being like, how the fuck do I deal with that?
I just said to my husband the other day, I was like, look, babe, I'm sorry. I've been a mess this year. But the reality is, it's like, I'm finally like, oh, inner child sad. Inner teenager's pissed. And adult me's like, what the heck is happening? I'm still in the middle of it. It's a real crisis of self. Why do you think I started lifting again? I was like, go back to
move
what
your
you
body.
know.
Yeah.
Like move your body, get into your practice, find what you love, and know that you've got yourself, right? And luckily this time around, I've got a wonderful husband. I've got a wonderful kid, and although I'm still struggling, like it's different. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I'm thankful for that, right? Like that little me who didn't have what she needed, she found it eventually, and what a beautiful thing that is, even though I can grieve what might have been, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think about that because I think for many people, what they haven't had the opportunity to learn, and I think because, again, we live in such a hustle culture, is it's like, well, when there's a problem, fix it. And so for many people, when they hear inner child work, it's like, I just have to know that when I was 4, I felt this way, and then tell myself it's okay, I felt that way, and give myself a hug, and then everything's going to be fine. One, I think many people are like, that sounds very woo-woo. How do I do that? And then on the flip side, it's like, well, how can you expect when you've been holding on to that, let's say since you were 4, since you were 9, since you were 16, and there's moments in between that too. It's not just at those ages. It's these timestamps that your brain and body have housed, even if they're not on the surface for you to name yet, where you felt less. You felt not enough. You felt rejected. You felt whatever those things were. You felt scared out of your mind watching people die. Like you had these realities that got put into your brain and body, and you're going to react from them. And it takes decades to undo some of that and to rewire your brain. And so I'm curious because, I know we got some of the backstory about how you ended up painting and the joy you got from that, but we haven't talked really about the subject matter of what you paint. And there's some interestingness to that because at least my experience of your work thus far is everything from these large scale murals to the painting that you have behind you that I've been loving watching you work on Instagram. They're really all about people. And there's these bold, beautiful colors and this vibrance. And it's hard to not see it, which is really interesting. And they really are all about some form of community and people and connection. And so did that happen on a subconscious level, or was that a conscious decision when you started focusing there?
So I think, it's an interesting thing. I've always been obsessed with people, right? Like, and I think always looking for community, always looking for my people. There's definitely a concept in queer culture where, your family is found, right? Like it's not necessarily who birthed you.
Right.
It's who brings you through in your life, And for me, that's really who brought me through were the people I found along the way. So yeah, I love community. I love people. I love diversity. I love that we all come to the table with something different and that there's beauty in the mess of life. And I will say a lot of it was unconscious, I think. I think I just, especially when it comes to feeling seen, feeling worthy. Like my first book I ever made the title was Worthy. But I never did the self-reflection, Like I was like, well, I just want to give this to people and I love people and I'm just, that's how I feel. And my husband, like I said, this year has been a lot of reflection. He was like, why I thought you knew. Like, I knew.
I knew
why
what you were trying to get at.
this.
Yeah.
Like, duh. And I was like, oh. I really was in my own little delulu land. Like,
Well, you were, but you weren't, because on
yeah.
some level, your body was trying to be like, no, this is a thing we need to do. And there's healing, even if it wasn't conscious.
Yeah.
You just now have a new wave of it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think you think about it, like, it's for someone who was very lonely as a child. Like, I'm painting my friends. I'm painting possible friends, people who could be friends, people who are friends. I mean, that's what we're really looking for. This is where we find our purpose, right? Like, through others and through the service of others. And, for everything that Oakland was hard, Oakland also taught me to care for others. That community is important, that you have to show up for people and use your places of privilege to rise everyone up, right? And so, especially with my painting, that has always been, like, okay, if I can make one more person feel seen or heard, then I've done something right with my career and with my talent, right? Like, I love to paint, but we got enough of the Mona Lisa. I say this often, like, we got enough of the Mona Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get, our friends who live down the block. Like, let's get people who exist in the world. We don't have one type of beauty. So why paint one type of beauty and perpetuate pain when you can perpetuate pleasure, beauty? We're all beautiful. So I guess it's part just, I don't know. I think we were talking about this before we did the podcast too, where it was like art as therapy. Like, sometimes, you give a kid a crayon and like you talk to them and it's easier for them to talk, right? Or they're able to draw something that they can't put into words. I guess that's what I've been doing.
Well, and okay, so then my first curiosity, do you ever paint yourself?
I have. There's one right behind me. I do it rarely. And that piece I did is called This Is Me. And it's me like maybe 6 weeks postpartum. Fully nude, tits a sagging, stretchy skin, but I'm looking at you. And like, God, how hard it was to paint this, because we're told, right? Like, that we're supposed to look a certain way and you're supposed to bounce back and you're supposed to be all these things. But like, what a transformation and how beautiful that is. But it was hard, right? Like, you're like, oh, I'm going to paint my stretch marks. Like, yeah. Like, what am I doing?
I spend every day trying to hide them. I can't have them on the canvas. Yeah.
My mommy belly, my one boob is full of milk, the other is not, But by painting it, all of a sudden I bring beauty to it, right? Like, no longer is that body type in the closet. No longer is it shameful. I painted it and it's beautiful. And when I finished that painting, ooh, did I sob on the floor? Like, I was like, this is what I do for others. I'm doing it for myself, right? Like, you are beautiful just as you are. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? But it's beautiful.
And what you did there is a different iteration from, making the book the worthy book, and then not knowing necessarily, okay, well, am I also worthy? Am I in this book? Am I representing myself? Because you were so giving to other people. Going back to this thing that I love about you is your willingness to just, is effusive? It's the right word, effusive. When you're very effusive, it's like you give it to the whole. I think that's right. I'll fact check it. We'll see.
I think it's right.
I think it sounds right. We're going to go with that. But it just sort of pours out of you.
Yeah.
And I do think a big part of that is because community was so important to you, because you're naturally a very empathetic person. You're also able to, and this is one of the gifts of having ADHD, is you can pick up on a lot of different cues and signals. Sometimes it's like a clusterfuck of ping pong balls in your brain and you're like, could we just stop? But also you can witness the world in a very different way. And so you could see these things and you could leverage that to show other people that the painting that you did of yourself was your way of coming into starting to see yourself and to give yourself. It's the same as you walking out the door at 16. It's the same as you making the decision of, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to make this change. I'm going to continue to try to live my life in a way that isn't about other people or waiting around for someone else to give me something. I'm going to own it. And so you're doing that, like owning your fucking body because you don't need someone else to tell you that you're allowed to.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'm interested in is as I think about you and all of the work that you do and this beauty that you create and this giving yourself space and a voice, have you ever painted your younger self?
Oh, I was just thinking about doing it the other day. No, I haven't. I mean, I think, that it's so raw for me still. It's like I think about little Tracy and I just
Yeah.
cry, like, oh, I just, but I think, that's the beauty of artwork. Like, and that's the
Mhm.
beauty of doing what I did after I was pregnant and painting that piece. And the more I lean into my own mental health, the more I realize how important this is not just my story. This is many people's stories, and
Yeah.
I am just a conduit,
Yeah.
Yeah, probably I'll do it sometime.
And maybe it's just for
Yeah.
you. Maybe it's not something that everybody else gets to see, but I wonder,
Yeah.
it's clear that there's a safety in your brain to paint. You're able to communicate through it. And so
Yeah.
you're going to access it different through your painting than you would through maybe talk therapy or some other form of communication. There's potentially something there. And then you might
Mhm.
couple it with talk therapy or some other processing, or maybe as you come in and you're ready, you're like, I'm ready for a 1 rep max day and I really got to go do something big with my body. But like,
Got me there.
there's something with that. And
Yeah.
I think it'd be a gift to yourself and something that no one else you're not waiting for the rest of the world to see you anymore
Yeah.
because you don't need it, but you
Well,
seeing you.
I think also, taking myself out of the equation, or maybe it is me still in the equation a little bit. It's like a lot of this work and a lot of what I think I exist in the world is I know what it feels like not to be seen. I
Mhm.
know what it feels like to be overweight in a society that wants thinness. I know what it means to starve myself in a society that wants
Mhm.
thinness. I know what it feels like not to be chosen, what it feels like not to be seen. And it's when I make this work, right? Even when it is deeply personal, I'm aware that I'm not the only one, right?
Mhm.
Like that by making this work, and I think I said this earlier, like if I can make one person feel like this is me
Mhm.
in your work, you've done something right. And like for
Mhm.
me, yeah, I like being seen. I like all of that. But it almost like I'm such a giver. I want to I want to give that to the
Mhm.
world. I want you to turn the corner and, be look at something and be like, "Wow, I'm a part of something." Because a lot
Mhm.
of us don't feel that way.
Yeah. Well, and what is it like for you? I mean, you use your platform very much to focus on other people. I mean, even just thinking about the stories you're telling and building community but we get to see all of you kind of show up too. Like you said, the person that's like, "Oh my gosh, you're just like who you are in your Instagram account."
Yeah.
You know, you're allowing people to see you and there's this kind of I feel like a back and forth because there's one thing when you're painting and you're like, I just want somebody to feel seen. You've
Mhm.
also gone from painting and maybe starting a business to a lot of acclaim. Like people know
Thanks.
you and you go and they're like, oh my gosh. And they want to
Yeah.
see your work and they celebrate you and there's a following. And so is that ever hard to be so seen in that light?
I think the hardest thing is it's hard for me to remember everyone's name, and I really wish I could. Like I am honored. Like I am honored. And I think one of the reasons people do connect with my work and do feel like they want to come out and support is because I'm hitting on those things, those raw nerves. Like, yes, the work is
Yeah.
pretty and it's rainbow and it's beautiful, but you dig in and you're like, oh my God, this is about the death of a parent.
Yeah.
Or this is about feeling lost, or this is about weight, or this is about, all these things that we deal with. And I just happen to make it rainbow. So it's maybe a little
Yeah.
more palatable. I don't
Yeah.
know. But when you dig, and this is a lot of us as humans. Like on the surface, we're all just people walking around. But if you dig into anyone's psyche, I'm sure you know this, like
Hmm.
there's so much there. There's so much richness. Sorry, that was a tangent. I guess as I get more famous or as I get more acclaim, I am just truly thankful that my my brain is resonating with the rest of the world, and that like it has an impact, and that people do care about these things, and that like our community can be big, and that I'm building community. Like, what an amazing thing. You know, like honestly, I'm just this little lady from, not so little now, I'm tough and big, but you know, I'm just this lady who has some mental health issues.
Yeah.
And loves to paint. And I could just be doing this. I mean, even if I didn't have a platform, I would still paint, you know, or I would still make. I'm a maker. That's where I understand the world. And regardless if I was famous or not, I would do it. But it's amazing that I can actually make a semi-living off of it and have an impact and do something big. I mean, what is it? The Japanese thing of ikigai or whatever. Have you heard about this?
I know a little, but not a ton. Yeah, you teach me more.
Well, I'm not Japanese in any way, shape, or form, but my understanding is it's the cross-section of like what you're good at. It's good for the world and you can make money at it. You know, it's like, you know, and that's like the golden,
like the Venn diagram intersection. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the golden moment, right? And I feel blessed that I feel like I've found that little intersection of like, it's good for me, it's good for the world, it's something I'm good at.
Yeah.
And I make a little money at it, and that's good too, you know.
I mean, I think it sounds like you have a very healthy perspective of, and I think this is again where when we talked about you being able to make the choice for yourself, this situation now, your ability to stay in your authentic self, because you went from living a life where you never felt seen to being
Yeah.
very seen.
Yeah.
And you're still able to hold it. And I'm sure this is a work in progress where you're able to let the spotlight stay on you a little bit, but you're also able to still spread it to everybody else who doesn't feel what you feel now, but feels what you felt when you were younger. And I think that authenticity and that ability to keep it full circle, what you've done is you've wrote yourself into the collective rather than it being only about making sure everybody else feels okay, or doing the opposite where it becomes all about you. And I think that's a very beautiful place to be in. My guess is it doesn't come easy all the time, because when there are moments where your depression comes knocking, or where there's moments when your ADHD is like, fuck yeah, I'm coming in hot. Like, it pulls you in different directions mixed with trauma. Like, you have a collection of trauma stories that are going to try to pull you into shame. They're going to try to pull you into defense. And so that ability to, I think what I know listeners are listening to that they're also going to like is the idea that we're seeing a full person who is completely imperfect and absolutely celebrating the beauty of themselves and the world around them. And that's humanity. And that's the thing that I think we've lost a bit of touch with.
Well, I think even in the celebrity culture, right? Like a lot of Instagram is your highlight reels, is all of those things. But I say this all the time and people laugh at me, but your first take is your best take, right? Like, I got a lisp. I maybe stuttered over this thing. I maybe didn't say this the right way, but that's authenticity. And like I said earlier, like in the mess, that's the beauty. That's what my work is, right? Like I'm a mess. We're all messes. Sometimes I post on Instagram that I'm having a hard day and I post something heart-wrenching because that's what it felt like to me today, you know? And sometimes you get my highlight reel and I'm walking around Miami in a fancy outfit because I feel good and I should celebrate that. And I think at the longer term, right? Like, so the art has its own impact, but now as I become like more of an Instagram celebrity, that has an impact too. And showing up as my authentic self, showing up at whatever size I am and whatever, you know, state of ADHD or lisping or whatever it is, like the mere fact that I am willing to be witnessed in my growth, I think is a really important aspect of the work that I do, right? Like I'm not perfect and perfection is not my goal. Like you look at my work, my perfection's not the goal. It's a mess. But that's the beauty of it. I'm a mess. We're all messes. And I think is for me the revolutionary thing, especially as a woman, especially as like a queer woman in this world. Like I'm a mess, and that's okay. It's okay. Like I don't need to be perfect, and there's no such thing, right?
Right.
Like and that in the work, in how I show up in the world, I'm doing something right. I hope.
Well, and I'm curious before we tell everybody where they can come celebrate you, find your art, buy your art, wear your art, especially as you have, your voting shirts, but also I think so much other merch that needs to be coming. I think we need a whole lifting swag of like t-shirts and sweatpants and maybe some weightlifting gloves. But before we get to that, I'm curious. I have two questions, and I know that you said sometimes your brain might want me to repeat the second one. So I'll say them both and then we'll go one at a time. So first question, knowing where you're at now and everything that you have learned in this beautiful iterative process and the state you're in with it now, if you could go back to your 9-year-old self, to your 16-year-old self, to the day that you decided, I don't know if I'm worth living anymore, what would you want to tell that Tracy?
You're worth it. Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry. That's it, man. You're worth it. Like you deserve to be here. And that's it, man. You're loved. You're worthy. Like just as you are. Isn't that so hard to say to your little self? Like it's so funny. That's what I needed to hear. And that's like what I give the world is what I needed to hear. And by giving it, I receive it,
Okay. And now I'm going to make you take it one step further.
Oh, no.
Okay. I know. I'm sorry. I have to. You knew this when you were coming on with a therapist.
I knew I was going to cry. I didn't put any makeup underneath my eyes.
Okay. So now I want you to fast forward. Okay. And we're going to talk to two people. I want you to talk to your child when they turn 16 and they're having a hard moment. And I want you to say something now that you want to make sure that they can hear and hold. And then I'm going to ask you to talk to that Tracy that's going to have their own hard moment. So what do you want to tell them first? And then what do you want to tell yourself?
I'm here for you. Like life is hard, but I'm here for you. And we'll figure it out. And that's what I would tell myself too. That's what I needed, someone that was in my corner. And I think that's what we all need is just someone you turn to that's like, hey, I got you. Whatever it is, if it's sitting here with you, I'll sit. If it's taking a walk, it's like those simple things. Like, I'm not looking for answers. Like, you got to find those answers for yourself. But having someone to walk that path with is important.
Yeah. How are you feeling right now, having done this whole process? Your first take is your best take, right? So I mean, you knew this is where you were going to go. You trusted it. But how are you feeling?
Like I need more therapy.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
No, I think it's a beautiful thing to dig, right? Like, and this is what we've been hinting at this whole talk, right? Is like, where do I come from? Where do we come from? What do we need? Like, this is the digging we're doing, right? Like, we're like, okay, what is it? What is it? And at the very core of it, right, is love, right? Like, this is what we're all searching for. This is what we're all hoping for. This is what little 6-year-old Tracy wanted, This is what not only little 6-year-old Tracy wanted, but everyone, it was the core. So how am I feeling right now? I feel thankful that we can still cry together, that we can do that digging and feel safe in that space, that like we don't have to hide from big feelings.
And that they're allowed to exist. And I think you did such a beautiful job allowing yourself to be seen in that, because that isn't easy. And I know you've made a practice of sharing. There's still vulnerability. There's still risk taking every time you do that. And so
of course,
naming that and owning that. And I think it says a lot about your readiness for the next layer of the dig. And it's going to be, I have a feeling 2025 might not be better than 2024 in terms of the depth, but I think the overall movement that you'll feel. Like, I think you are somebody that you're not going to stop until you reach that point. And I think you're going about it in a very healthy and curious way. I'm sure there are times it doesn't feel like that. And there are probably times you need an outside check, but
talk to my liver. No,
or, the fact that you were prescribed naps from your doctor a few weeks ago. There are a few things that we can work through, but there's this natural sense of, I think, curiosity and commitment that really comes along with this tenacity that you have to do hard things. And you've figured out how to direct those hard things in a way that serves you and serves the world. And so, okay, as we wrap up, because everyone's like, awesome, I love this. I'm also bawling and crying and feeling all the feels. Where the fuck can I get this person's art? So tell everybody, where can they find you? How can they celebrate you? Where do they go?
So I'm most big on Instagram. It's the Tracy Piper, TheTracyPiper, because I'm the one, the only. Oh God. If you go there, also my website is thetracypiper.com. That's where you can find more info about myself, merch, and it will also link you to the gallery I work with right now, which is Boss Gallery. It's a woman-owned gallery. It's really cool. I think we need more women in the arts. That's my little shout out. Mm-hmm. That's why I enjoy working with her. So she's got a ton of my work, a ton of originals. So that's a great side community to also support. And yeah, that's kind of how you find me.
I love it. I love it. I mean, you have so many different shows and things that you're doing. And I think that the beauty, again, in creating community across the country, across the world through everything that you're doing. And so I'll make sure that I have the links in the show notes, listeners. So you're going to make sure you go down there. You're going to click that. You're going to follow the Tracy Piper on Instagram so that we can build more community that way. And you're going to laugh at some of the most ridiculous things that she posts that brings so much joy and normalcy to the world. And I think at some point, figuring out for you, whether you're somebody that's gone into a gallery and you've looked at art, maybe you've made a passive judgment about it, or you've seen a person that's acting a certain way and you stayed at the surface and you're like, what a dick, or what a this, fill in the blank. Invite yourself where you can to bring that curiosity that Tracy's talking about. How can we look beyond the surface to see it isn't just a person that's all smiles and glowing and happy, or a person that just seems like they're raging out and they're an asshole to everyone around them. There's a story, there's depth. And all of us, regardless of how we show up in the world, need love. We need connection. We need belonging. And we are doing the best we can to survive in a world where most of us have never felt it in an unconditional way. And so if we can give grace, if we can give space to that, there's so much beauty that can be had. And to think about it for ourselves, where we're performing and how we take that down. And so.
And also how we show up.
Yes.
That's important too.
Yes.
How you show up in the world, how you give to the world, and how you give to yourself. Those are also a part of it, right? Like that you and your authenticity is worthy and beautiful as you are.
I love it. It's the best place for us to end. Little mic drop moment. Everybody telling themselves that. All right, people, go to the show notes. Obviously, you'll have all of those links to the Tracy Piper. You'll also have links for any of the resources that I have if you're ready to take your next steps on your shame resilience journey. We will be back next Sunday with another episode. Until then, continue on this journey. It's hard, and I promise it is absolutely worth it.